this. I knew when I started this that I was going to lose, I'm going to be polite, I lose money writing this book, okay? Because I paid for the editing, design, and everything out of my pocket. It's a small, weird topic. And so if you're interested in how I became interested in this, is that I moved to New York in 1988 to go to graduate school in historic preservation. And it was in Ithaca, New York, and my landlord was a general contractor and a carpenter. Okay. And one day in the afternoon, we were just talking about his day's work, and he said something to me like, "Oh yeah, that house over there had a sprung dance floor." And I'm from the South. I didn't cover this today, but I'm from the South, and we mostly didn't have those. Okay. And so I was intrigued by it. Now, I don't know about any of you, okay, but I can get intrigued by a topic, and it's with me the rest of my life. The biggest topic I've been intrigued with was graining, you know, in faux bois imitation. This came way later. And so for the next 38 years after that conversation, I have followed this up. Before the internet, I was putting articles and ads in the back of journals. Are you aware of sprung floors? Could you tell me what you know? People architects and preservation people sent me letters from all over the United States, and I had the piles. I continued to have interest in it without any idea of writing about it or doing anything with it. And then we had the internet. Suddenly I could go on the newspapers.com, 10 other sites, and enroll with. I found out a whole lot more about it. It was more interesting than I thought it would be. And then a few years ago, I got sick, and they said, "You're going to die." Didn't die. And I thought, well, my children are going to throw all of this research in the garbage can, you know, and I better do something with it. So that's how this happened. Okay. This short book and sprung floor topic is architecture, engineering, sociology, and history. It's all of these combined into one thing. Okay. Keep on going.
Oh,
Okay. All right, there's a video, it's not gonna work. Okay, so let me tell you about that video. It's not gonna work here. The most famous venue with the sprung dance floor in the United States is the Crystal Ballroom in Portland, Oregon. Okay. And I've not visited, my friends have danced on it, and there's been a long article on National Public Radio about that floor. This video shows as the people dance, the floor moving up and down. Okay. And I'll talk more about that floor a little bit later. Will it not move?
it's thinking.
It's thinking. Oh, wait.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's showing up on my end. It's just not working over there.
Maybe. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Oh, good.
Ballroom.
Oh. No.
Yeah, there's the video. It's not going to show it. Don't even try. Yeah. The Crystal Ballroom was built in 1909. Interestingly. There we go.
I think
So-
I was on the wrong page. I think that was my bad. Okay.
No, this is. So first, what is a sprung dance? Okay, sprung dance floor is a ballroom music dance floor made to bounce up and down. Okay, it was initially for the enjoyment of the dancers. All right, they say some of them bounced up and down as much as 6 inches in the middle, created a front feeling. There were other reasons combined with the sprung dance floor, and some architects and people in preservation would argue, maybe right or maybe wrong, that specific floors were not for the enjoyment of the dancer, but to protect the plaster ceiling down below, or to reduce the noise for people sleeping down below. Generally, it was kind of all wrapped up into one. They still make sprung dance floors. Some of them still have springs, and others are just cushion. And a modern cushion floor for modern dance and ballet and all that is for your joints. It's not for the enjoyment of the dancers. In fact, they're usually pretty subtle. They may not even realize that they're moving underneath. So what do they feel like? Okay, here's some ideas of here's some ideas from the 19th century how they felt. Certain dances will cause the floor to spring 6 or more inches at the center. Wow, that's a whole lot, right? And some people were said to fall down. Had a sprung floor, it yielded to the steps like waves in the gentle sea. All right, I doubt that in about 6 inches, but those are accounts you can go on. Go. All right. Let me look at you. This gentleman needs to. Well, no, know who Eric Clapton was. Some of you, that's like who was Benny Goodman to me, right? All right. But anyway, so there was a famous hotel, dance hall on an island in the Thames River in London. And Eric Clapton said, bounce up and down so much, you didn't have to dance. It would go 6 or more inches up into the air. Rod Stewart said, when people danced on one side, the other side bounced up. At this place, eel pie, and I have to say, just a little, eating eel doesn't appeal to me, but that's why that hotel was called that, because it specialized in serving eel. All of the big rock and roll stars of my generation played at eel pie. Okay? You can go there. The Savoy Ballroom, you may have heard of in New York City, because in the PBS special on jazz by Ken Burns that was featured in his, and you can read this. Everybody was romping, stomping, moving, and grooving, and it was dancing heaven, and even the floor was bouncing up and down. Okay, we're going to come back to this, but that was a basket weave floor, one by lumber, crisscrossed. It's a crosshatch. That's how that was on the floor. Okay. So you can't really discuss the topic without including the history of early taverns in America. As the earliest ballrooms were in taverns, Long Island, Boston area, and in the first areas that were settled on the seacoast in New England. And as we grew and Pioneer America went across into New York, then into the Midwest, Montana, and down here and down in California, that's the pattern. The pattern is a U shape over the whole United States, kind of excluding everything. There are venues, but it kind of excluded all of those. So this is the Lackey Brook House. It's gone now in Chester, Vermont. It was famous for its sprung floor. What I want to point out is, stables were over here. These early taverns served as a place for stagecoach, the mailing and receiving packages. Some of them sold goods. They were the place in town when they early on where you went to a wedding, where you went for political meetings, auctions on the steps, hangings out front. Okay, so there's nothing more important to the community than the local tavern, and frequently the local tavern was there before the church was, and church services were often in the tavern too. So these spread across the whole United States. This one I had visited in the 1990s, and here is the ballroom. You can see the sprung floor from the underside. So the question then that most architects and people like that would want to know is when we were building timber frame buildings. Not from dimensional lumber, but timber frame or brace frame buildings. How did you make the floor spring? Go ahead. And I'll come back. This is Wick's Tavern. These are Habs drawings. You know what Habs is? American, historic American building survey. And, that's the appearance a long time ago. It's gone. But you can see by 1686, there was a ballroom here. You see the elliptical, this is not very clear. There's an elliptical ceiling here where the ballroom is, okay? And I reached out to the various historians in Long Island, and I got a letter back that everyone thought this building had a sprung floor, but we don't know the tour. If it did have a sprung floor, it's the earliest one that I could find in America. But again, you were beginning to see a certain form for the ballrooms that went on for the next 200 years. But see, let's move on 50 years. And this is in Marblehead, Massachusetts. And this house belonged to a man named King Robert Hooper. King because he was king of the fishing trade in Marblehead. This was his father's house, and he added the third floor in 1745, and the third floor had a ballroom with front floor. Every account you read about says it has front floor. This is the ballroom, and you see the arch ceiling. Note the chimney, because I want to read about that. This belongs to local historical society. And I wrote the architect who's responsible for this. And he said there's structural issues and substantial settlement. The areas adjacent to the chimneys are much higher, and a lot of warping. I don't know if it has a sprung floor, but it sure does bounce. Okay, so I'm pretty sure it had that was architect Bruce Greenwald not too long ago to me. The early ballrooms usually had a chandelier. This one doesn't show benches. Where I'm from, they almost always open to a balcony outside, but a lot of them didn't. Go ahead. All right, bandstand for your violinist or flautist, whoever was here. Usually there was a chandelier, benches on the wall. This is Stonehouse Tavern in New Hampshire. This is the circa 1820 Phoenix building. It's a hotel in Pittsburgh, New York. And this space is still here, but they fixed the floor so it wouldn't bounce anymore. I knew the person who owned this building. He's passed now, and he owned a newspaper, and this was partitioned off into cubicles, and they fixed the floor so it wouldn't bounce. Because if you have a good sprung floor and you try to have furniture in there, or your coffee cup right here, it will bounce off as people are walking next. Okay. This picture kind of makes me sad. I'll let you all read this, okay? But what happened was that the ballrooms, the taverns became bars, and you have this man sitting on the benches from the ballroom. But I see a bed over here. Makes me think that maybe this house no longer was a tavern. Okay? And this is kind of sad. What happened to them? As I drive the back roads in New York State, taverns are kind of gone. But if you know what you're looking for, a lot of them are evident. You'll see an elliptical gable window surrounded by limestone. Or you'll see a really nice front door and tablature with maybe a couple side lights. these were always close to the road in our area, because if you were too far off the road, it created a terrible burden with snow and mud and all that. And they're still out there. They're all over the place. If you just know what you're looking for. Okay. But this is pretty true. Let's go on. The tavern ballroom succumbed to your town and village lodges. Halls, I have a list here. Downtown, nice brick buildings, stone buildings, whatever. Oddfellows halls, firemen's halls, miners halls, union halls, Elks lodges, Masonic temples, government halls. There were ballrooms even in some churches. Not where I can assure you the Methodists and Baptists do not have ballrooms in church. Okay. This is one of the famous ballrooms in America. It's Hamilton Hall in Salem, Massachusetts. Designed by Samuel McIntyre. McIntyre, if you don't know, and I don't know why anybody would, he is the most famous carpenter and wood carver in America. His works in the Metropolitan Museum of Florida in the American Wing. He was something else. And apparently he designed Sprung Floor, this building. The night this opened, the minister from the church next door, can't remember his name, said, back to back and face to face, everyone here is dancing themselves to hell. Okay. He stood outside and said that to everybody. But this building's famous because all the early presidents, well, they didn't die before that day, visited here. All the Roosevelts danced here. That sort of thing. It's a beautiful space. You can go ahead. So now I'm gonna go to Springfield. That's just all back. If you've ever stood on a board between two ladders, this is pretty stupid, but you know what a sprung floor feels like. Okay, it feels like it's going to give break, and it does. But the carpenters 300 years ago, 200 years ago, were way smarter, I think, sometimes than we give them credit for. And if you were to go into one of the early carpenter books, say Peter Nicholson's books from like 1795 or whatever on carpentry, you realize they were smart. The books are just full of algebra and geometry and no pictures. And that's how you built a house, and that's how you built a spiral staircase. And, you know, these weren't stupid people. And they knew that the spacing between the joists, depth of the joist, width of the joist, and the bracing all meant for a strong floor. So people will argue that sprung floors are a myth or they're an accident. It's just a weak floor. So what? But when you go into a building that's robustly built otherwise, and suddenly you have a floor where none of this is as robust as it ought to be. Of course, bracing is missing. The bracing here, bracing is missing. It has to be purposeful. Okay? And you know, this will make the floor spring for dancing. They also knew what kind of woods were bendy than others. All right, carpenters. Every carpenter should have a copy of that. Okay, and I think Amazon is coming out with a knockoff. Building construction by Frank Peter 19. Anyway, he has guidelines like this for assembly balls. And what he's just trying to show us here that you can't extend a white pine joist like you can a Georgia pine joist. The equivalent of Georgia pine joist here would be what Caitlin's using right now, Douglas fir. Very strong. So how did you build a sprung floor in a heavy timber frame building? What you would do? Heavy timber frame building is going to have a heavy timber sill, 2 stories. The heavy timber in the middle is a girt, heavy timber at the top is the roof plate, right? And then you've got posts and braces all along it to make it sturdy. So it's this building. These are your girts, which would be along here. So just inside the girts, which are held up with posts, they ran these heavy timbers end to end, the long ends. In this case, it's 35 feet. And no post under it, like under the substantial part of the building. Then they ran the joists, put the floor on. Okay, that's typically how it was done. There's countless explanations of how that was done. This one's a little different because it's got this perpendicular beam under it, about 3 or 4 inches under it. So if this gave, that will catch it. Okay, and this one's different because there is a rubber or purchase block on each one of those joists for resilience. Of course, those blocks now are because rubber doesn't last forever. You can't see this very well because of the lighting, but here we are. This is that long, there's a space here, though. This is that long beam that here is the I can't see this in, but anyway, the long beam and then the joists go on top of it, and right in here, there's rubber blocks. You can't see this in the slide, it's too wide. We'll go on, okay. When the sawmill came to town, which is pretty soon after any area was developed, we had dimensional lumber, and so the most popular floor, you see it all over the United States, it's called a double joist floor. This is a half strong. Okay. And the double joist floor was one set of joists hold the floor up, and they were weak. They might be overextended, they might not be deep enough, but they were weak, so the floor moved. And then the second row of joists are holding up the ceiling below. And sometimes not, that was a much more substantial floor or set of joists. So that if this gave, those catch it, okay? This is the Jesse Smith Tavern, Big Bend, Wisconsin, 1847, double joist floor. The thing to notice here is that, and when you read about it, that you want to stagger so they don't rub against each other, but they're not always built that way. Ideally, if they're staggered, whatever it is below it, sleeping rooms, or whatever, you don't hear the dancing. Okay, you can go with it. Oh, this is tough. This is the Oliver Loud Tavern in Egypt, New York, and it's old. And you can't really see what we've got going here, but we have an original joist, and then we have new stuff to make it not bounce anymore. Okay, and then we have another one. Let's go to the next slide. Unfortunately, I had it strong. So the joists holding the floor up are really no more than saplings, a little smaller than that. Okay, and notice the way they were pocketed into the timber at the end. They were pocketed in there so they would slide, which is one of the most dangerous things I have ever seen. I saw this in person, and I just couldn't believe what I was looking at. So those joists, which were not very substantial, and then 24 inches over was the ceiling joist, which was a regular dimensional timber. Okay, so if this failed, it would have caught it below, but that was very clearly meant to slide. All right, pretty you can't see it, but there that you can go in. Okay. I'm not a dancer, okay, but I danced on this and I used to try to dance. I took dance lessons with my ex-wife, and she said that was too rough. So here's how this goes. This is, I think, 56 feet in the end, maybe 18 feet that way. And we look down in the heat vent. And that's a hardwood joist holding the floor. This is a thinner one. This is opposite of how they normally work. This is a thinner joist holding the ceiling below. Okay, and they rub together, which really didn't want, but it doesn't matter. Because if they weren't sleeping rooms below this, it's just a plaster ceiling. This is some kind of hardwood I couldn't identify, right? But this floor bounced by extending the joist 2 extra feet beyond what it should have been. And also then, instead of being 16 inches on center, they placed 18 inches. It's a little weird. And that's why that floor bounced. This is the Oliver Clover Tavern. It's in Rochester, New York. It's still open, just like that right now. And its office is downstairs. Upstairs is still kind of wonderful. I worry about this. I think it's going to go away eventually. Okay. So here's the two things I've seen. Space, like the book said to do, so that they didn't interfere with each other. And then sometimes they were almost right together, which would have made noise. Okay. Okay, Caitlin. This is interesting. This is the Rawson Hollow Inn, 1811, south of Ithaca, New York, middle of nowhere, just desolate Appalachia. And I have a friend, Charlie Plamato, who salvages old wood floors and heavy timbers and things. And they were thinking about tearing this down. He called me, "You got to come see this," and it's 3 hours away. That is, and this is what I saw. You can't see it. The ballroom definitely had elliptical art seating. Okay. The benches are still on the wall. All of the paint finishes in here were original. Never been painted off. It's pretty amazing. The baseboards, which they call mop boards, were terracotta colored, which was kind of fun to see. I think that much of this was added. Okay. Rawson Hollow Inn, 1990s. It did get torn down. It's a house now. Go ahead. And here's what you have. Every joist has a lenticular arch cut out of the middle of it. You could feel this move if you jumped up and down. You need more people than just me. But the plaster ceiling below was protected. You can't see these because I'm standing down looking up. Each one of those is one of those arches in the joist.
Sawn from the middle or built up?
No, sawn from the middle. So I had a structural engineer and a preservation architect do this for me, and they were just astounded at this because, and they felt like whoever did it must have done it multiple times, because if you don't know what you're doing, you might use the wrong kind of wood. You might make this go over here too far. If this goes over too far, then this is going to split right across here. But none of them were split. It was hardwood. Again, this was 30-something years ago. I don't know. I didn't see what kind of, because I just wrote my notes. Maybe I could identify. You can go on. I thought it was an aberration, and then I discovered this. This is the Rogues Harbor Inn in Lansing, New York. It used to, I think, look over Cayuga Lake. It doesn't anymore, but it's just a beautiful old tavern inn. Okay, big one. 3rd floor is the ballroom. You can see here that historian wrote about it. She had seen the ballroom floor, and it was the same design. So they exist. Don't you think that's beyond imagination? Yeah, we can go on. Okay. There was a master carpenter, Jonathan Goldsmith, in Lake County, Ohio. That's way up on Lake Erie. All right, and he built multiple taverns, and he built them all with basket weave floors and basket weave boards. That's just layers of crisscrossed, like 1-inch timbers. Here's an example of that. That's a 3-layer basket weave floor. Here's a 1905 patent for the same design. In 1990, there was an article in one of the country's dance magazines, and the woman that wrote it said that a 3-layer basket weave was okay, but a 5-weave basket floor was much, much preferred, okay? And then in the mid-20th century, the famous choreographer George Balanchine patented the same floor, okay? He used it at every venue where his people danced, even in France. And in the book, there are videos of these being built. They're kind of fun to see. Let's go on. That's the basket weave floor. This is a truss floor, okay? And this appeared in like a 1917 book called Kinks for Builders, okay? And this same floor appeared in journals all over the United States, never attributed to an author except DPB. That was all. In Kinks for Builders, that was the name, and all the journal articles, so there was never a name. Couldn't find a patent on it, but is this familiar to any of you? Yes. Every wooden step ladder, not anymore, but every wooden step ladder you ever stepped on had this same system, so that if you were big and heavy and you stepped in the center, it bolstered the ends. About 30 years ago, I went on a job site and homeowner was painting his house. He had two extension ladders on the side of the house, with ladder jacks and a plank. It was a 19th century painter's plank with this system. Amazing, and I didn't take a picture. So theoretically, when the weight pushes this down, it's going to pull this up. It's pretty ingenious. Now I kept reading about truss floors with a lever, and I suppose there might be some way to lever this. It said that there was a board that you would pull up and lever that, according to how many dancers were on it. So you can make more springs, less spring. This is a wagon spring, common forever. And if you took one leaf from a wagon spring and put it between two heavy timbers, then you would create a wagon sprung floor. And Henry Ford used this. Henry Ford was an avid dancer. His reasons, Henry Ford was not a nice man. So his reasons for restoring and building these ballrooms that he did, both at Greenfield Village and other places, were because he hated jazz and he hated blacks and Jews. And he was very clear about that, and that he considered these ballrooms with square dancing wholesome American pastime. Okay, but he used wagon springs for all his floors. Seemed far-fetched, but this is a New York State marker near where I live in Lyman, New York. The Yellow Wasp Inn, built in late 18th century and torn down 100+ years later. When they tore it down, they said the 24 wagon springs were still there and all in perfect shape. I hear about white wagon springs in a lot of local venues. Okay. All right, so now wagon springs took a certain amount of metallurgy, but they could be made primitively. All right, but the helical coil sprung floor couldn't be made without modern metallurgy. And these floors were frequently referred to as floors over railroad springs. And I tried to search when did trains leave a leaf spring and go to helical springs. I looked at 1,000 pictures, but it's somewhere around the Civil War. Okay. And that's when the Bessemer process came out right after the Civil War. And better metallurgy, you could have helical coil spring. Here's a patent for one from 1877. Can't read it about. And then here's another one, the Woods Landing Dance Hall in Wyoming, 1932. And these things are still being patented. And each one of those is a spring.
And you're talking about springs like this.
Yeah.
Hard to see the picture.
These are hard to see, but Elite Hall, Hiram, Utah, there's your springs under the floor. And this is Heber Amusement Hall, Heber City, I don't know where either one of them are. You all know where, yeah. Don't, can't see it here, those are helical springs underneath, okay? This is a theory. I read over and over about suspended floors. You're worried about suspended floors from the late 18th century all the way into the 20th century. And if I have no pictures, but a man who was the president of the Historical Society in Acton, Massachusetts, told me in a phone conversation, oh yeah, I had seen them in Massachusetts, I'm sorry, New Hampshire when I was young. They took heavy steel rods or iron rods and hung them from the heavy timbers of the building. So the floor under that, the dance floor under that was floating. It was suspended from the building. It was not attached. They used chains for that, and they used rods for that. And I ran into it over and over. Couple of examples. The 1750 New Boston Inn in Massachusetts, where Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Bing Crosby, and others used to hang out, and the owner there told me, Barbara Colorio, it hung by chains from a barrel ceiling so it would not wake up the inn's guests when they were square dancing up. Okay. The Greenbrier, are you familiar with the Greenbrier Hotel in West Virginia? Well, accounts say that the Greenbrier Ballroom had a suspended floor. I called Robert Kant, who is their historian, and he said, no, that's wrong. It was the Central Hotel known as Old White that preceded the Greenbrier Hotel, 1858, and the ballroom was hung by chains. That's from their history. Not mentioned here are rubber floors. Okay, 1873 Druids Hall in St. Louis was laid over rubber cylinders. The floor at Tammany Hall in New York City was laid over rubber wheels. The 19th century tavern in Watertown, New York was laid over rubber balls. And various floors were laid over those rubber blocks like I showed you with that first example. This is Ringler's Dancing Academy 1909, which became the Cotillion Hall, which is now the Crystal Ballroom, which I talked about before. This is hard. I don't understand this floor. Okay, it's a big ball bearing and spring steel rocker panel, and somehow this floats. So there's your bearing, and there's your steel rocker panel, and somehow this floor floats. That has been in existence since the beginning, I think 1909. Patented. You'll read about patented ball bearing floors everywhere, but here's one that still exists. Okay, there was one a few miles away, it burned down, but here you go. That's the patented ball bearing rocker panel, and apparently, because this is a public venue, apparently that's okay with the code people. The code people frequently go into these buildings if they're still in use, and they make them fix it so it won't spring anymore. All right. Moving on. Another famous ballroom in Canada is Commodore Ballroom in Vancouver. It's the outside of it. So it's 20th century. Don't look at it. That's the ballroom floor. And it's tires under it, stuffed with horsehair. Okay. That's the famous floor. Okay. Another tire floor. This is worth you all looking up. Ed Draw was just like Henry Ford, except much nastier. He would invite the KKK to his house and things like that. And he considered all modern music nasty. And so he built his own ballroom for his wife and his daughter's friends. His ballroom, this is taken from a photograph, but I didn't have permission to use this photograph. It's fresh photograph, so we drew it and changed it a little bit. Here's tires between the heavy timbers, and they are all connected to air compressors so that they can let air in and let air out or whatever. Okay, that's Ed Thrall's ball in 1970. This still there. People, he's gone. There's architects and historians and preservation people in Connecticut all know about this and have written about it. It's pretty interesting. It's another tire floor. Tire floors are still being built. They're kind of popular for like jujitsu floors and things like that. The problem with the tire floor is it's expensive because every tire needs to be the same size, okay, or they don't work. You can go. Just kind of. If we were to go from Toronto across the United States Canadian border all the way to the West Coast, almost every ballroom is horsehair floor. And they would put, that might be that deep. They would make wads of horsehair and lay the upper floor over it. And, so let's see, best damn dance floor in Canada. Gives a little. You can dance all night, your legs won't get tired. There, horsehair dance. Here's Danceland, Manitou Beach. You guys probably didn't know about this. It's the Dead Sea of Canada, so it's a salt, big salt lake up in Saskatchewan. Danceland's still there. Famous horsehair floor. Keep going. All right. So I found lots of references in England, not in the United States, in England too. It has a tennis ball sprung floor or a tennis ball cushion floor in big venues. And then I found another source that said all those comments about string floors aren't real, that won't work. So I didn't write about it. Got to the end of my work and I learned that yes, there were tennis ball floors. This is from France. It's a patented floor in France, a spectacle. Dance ball. That's, there you go. It's pretty interesting. So,
What's around the tennis balls?
each one of these tennis balls is half. Okay, so that's going to be turned over on a solid floor. And how these systems work is that these are normally tongue and groove boards that are laid down and put together, and that half of the tennis ball will give it its cushion. Okay. The other thing I didn't say about the helical coil spring, there's a company in Kentucky that still manufactures a helical coil spring. It's just like this, where you have a tennis ball, you have little springs. And it's a panelized system, tongue and groove that goes together to create a floor. Called power spring. I'm at the end here. There is absolutely no end to what people do to make floor cushions or sprung. This is everywhere. You go Google the pool noodle floor and you'll see great examples of this, especially on Google Images. And you take a pool noodle and you decide how much you want it to move, cut them, glue them down, either on, I could glue them down here, or I could glue them to another board, a plywood, and turn it over, and that's the pool noodle floor. A cushion floor, on the other hand, yesterday we were on a job site, and we took the, these squares they have in playrooms that they attach together. There's foam. I take them and use them in people's bathrooms so I don't drop a hammer on them. Okay, we can do 2 or more layers of that on the floor, then you put plywood floor over that. That would be a cushion floor, but it works as long as the foam holds up.
Remember, for separate components, pool noodle and tennis balls, those would like deflate over time, right? So
I think so. Yeah. They would give out. So you certainly need access. Yeah. Okay. That's something that bothered me about the early rubber floors, because rubber doesn't hold up. Think about it. Christmas dance. The rubber's gonna be hard as a rock unless it's in a conditioned space. Okay? But I'm sure in warm weather initially it works. But rubber gets hard quick. That's yeah. That's the end. Okay. If you have any questions, I'll answer them. But there you go. Huh?
I have a question about horsehair.
Yeah.
So the tires Horsehair, but the ones that have, is that just?
That's just horsehair. Reams and sometimes bags full of horsehair onto the floors. I don't know how long that would work, but it's pretty interesting.
They used to use horsehair for chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, lasts a long time too. As an aside to that, I visited India in 1982, when India was as primitive as it ever was. It was before it became a modern country. And everyone in India sleeps on a futon. There's cotton in futon, okay? And then, maybe now, I don't know. If you're in India, you will hear this sound all day long, almost everywhere you go in the city. Boing, boing, boing. And it's like someone's got a bow in there and just pulling them. What is that? These were people who you would hire off the street to come in. They would take a seam ripper and they would open up your mattress and they would fluff up all the cotton again. And I suppose you could do that with the horsehair. No, I don't know. Yeah. That was a strange concept. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
I went to a gymnastics meet at the nearby college a few weeks ago. And they had like balls and like the horse, whatever, and then they have like a dance area.
Yeah.
And the floor there, like it's kind of springy. Is that like similar to this or is that different? Do you know like what type of floor they use for like that?
There are several companies in the United States that sell patented floors. Okay. There are companies that still sell coil spring in the United States. The basket weave, 3 or 4 companies still sell patented basket. A modern basket weave floor would still have the crisscross layers, but there may be resilient pads between the layers to add to that. And those are the only 2 that I know of, other than just foam and. Okay. Yeah.
So which one is nice?
What?
All the times.
Out of everything, out of everything, first of all, how high it goes depends on how many people are on it, doesn't it? The more people you have on it, the greater the bounce. And I really think that the earliest one where they extended 2 heavy timbers the length of the building, I think that one probably bounced wonderfully. And then the double joist. Okay. On that lenticular arch, that weird one, okay, that, I don't know if it mattered, but you know, they went all the way across the room. It was pretty long. And then there in the very middle of the room, there was a solid joist without the arch cut out. So that meant if you were dancing in the middle of the room, you got no bounce. But then as you got to the center of each side, you did your bounce. Okay. This is sure to be a New York Times bestseller. And I will retire in some wonderful island. All my friends have made fun of me for this for 20 years. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Everybody's going to love that book. So anyway, it's just a passion project. I hope you all have your own passion projects. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
It's 12:55.
I have to do that for New York State Congress. I gotta fix it.
How long is that?
40 minutes and then the rest for questions. Yeah.
We had
Yeah,
questions too, though.
actually, there's one more thing. It's not in here. For you carpenters. They would build a ballroom and they would cut the joist so they were crowned this way. Now, if the bottom was straight underneath it, that didn't mean anything. And a lot of the old carpenter books, it's common to see that you should always crown your joist if there's going to be a crowd so that people on the floor don't feel like they're in a scoop, okay? That's just logical carpentry. But they crowned it on the top, and then they crowned it under the bottom, and then they they put that same arch under the bottom, they were creating a spring. And those are common. Never seen. But everyone has told, oh, I've seen it. The problem with this whole research is that, you know it's there, but, it's a nice house now. You can't go in and tear someone's floor up. Yeah.
One of the things that you mentioned there is that, I don't know, people who dance. If there's a slope to the floor, I think even if it's only dancers will move.
They will.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's especially if you're doing a circulatory dance, it becomes hard to move up there because dancers rotate. If that's that kind of dance. But if you're doing like a set dance, like a square dance or something, the dancers will absolutely move down.
Yeah, move that.
And it
Yeah.
becomes very.
Okay.
And the person directing the dance says, okay, everybody move. Everybody move to the north,
Yeah.
everybody. And so you really have to be careful.
I wrote about dance disasters. There were sprung floors that collapsed. But when they were built with another floor under it that caught it. Doesn't mean people didn't get scared and they jumped out windows. John Kennedy's grandfather's name was Honey Fitz. And he was speaking at a hall up around Boston somewhere. 5,000 people showed up to hear him. I don't see the governor, maybe. I don't know. And the floor collapsed. People jumped out the window. That kind of thing would scare people. No one got hurt. But there were dance disasters. I found one in Boston where 109 people were killed with a sprung floor. I talk about these structural things. If you're a carpenter, if you put a dance floor in a balloon frame house and you attach the joist to the walls, then the walls come in, then it spreads out at the top. Houses fell down with crowds in it for reasons like that. Then if you had a masonry building and you put the joist into a pocket, Mike, you put the joist into a masonry pocket. If you don't put lead under that to prevent, because masonry is inherently damp, always, it will rot. So you had to put lead under it to prevent that. There were buildings that fell because the joists were pocketed into brick. They rotted, boom, floor fell in. There were several people killed at a pavilion over a lake one time. So there have been lots of dance disasters. And in modern times, there were dance disasters because of, I'm going to think about this. What was the phenomenon with the Tacoma Narrows Bridge? Yeah, okay. Yeah. There have been dance floor collapses. Has that happened on Sprung Floor? I don't know. They probably weren't aware if it did happen. There's a picture in here of the John Roebling's Brooklyn Bridge. And there was a big sign for everybody working there. Break step. Don't walk together. Because that vibration can make them fall. There's a lot to I didn't cover. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Good.
Okay, why the buildings that are on the list of
You can have.
that are in Utah?
Yeah.
How do you know that they have Sprung Dance Floor? Are they like on a, well, they're on this list, but did we ever have a Sprung Dance Floor?
Here?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, how do you know these ones do?
Almost all of these came from newspapers.com or the Fulton. Do you know about the Fulton site? They're catalogs of newspapers. Okay. And so I would at night sometimes search for, first of all, you can't just search for a sprung floor. You got to search for a sprung floor, a bouncy floor, a sprung board floor. I had a list of things you have to look for this long. And these would come up in the newspapers. And, so the Apollo Hall at American Fork was reported to be the first sprung floor in Utah for others to follow in the state, according to an article in the Salt Lake Tribune. Was it really a sprung floor? I was very clear about that. These all came out of the newspapers. I don't know. I haven't been there. A lot of these buildings don't exist anymore, but that's how I arrived at the list. So I don't really know. This is what I found.
Okay.
And there's possible, we'll say that room had a fabulous sprung floor. It's possible no one ever wrote a word about that, okay? Because they were so common. It was a ubiquitous thing. And so, well, everybody had sprung floors. So they would write about the dance.
Okay, interesting.
Some states, I didn't find anything. It's interesting, the lack of sprung floors in the South. I have been in constant contact with a woman who is the chairperson for Texas dance halls. That's a big deal there, also in Louisiana. Okay? But there is not a single known sprung floor in Texas.
Yeah, perfect and right back. At least say that it's the dance hall on the property. I think so.
I think religion had a lot to do with the lack of them in the South. When the pioneers came into the South, my family was at that same 1795 coming in the South. It was exactly at the same time when there was this new religious experience awakening, okay? And dancing was considered a sin. And I'm not saying it didn't exist, it did, but I found people who would say, oh, they never danced in my community. And then other people would say, oh, we danced every Saturday night. So I just, where it was. There's very few of them. So. Thank you all. That's enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
American heritage people. It's like all these people
Yeah.
I've only heard about it.
They're younger, started in 2021. The person behind you is the black shirt is the devil, if that matters.
It's all, I live in a historic house, so I'm like tied to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Love it. I guess it's not working.
Yes, sir.
The only sprung floor that I think I've ever was the Colonial ballroom.
It's on my list.
It makes it distinctive.
Who does?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And it's.
I have a feeling the person, I'm not sure this, the person who signed that floor may have done it many of.
Yeah.
Dances? Your dance?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What, contra dancing?
Yeah. So we're always.
She's gotta let me get this out of here. Oh, man, let's see, oh, she's gotta do it. If I just pull that out, it might hurt.
Well, it will probably be, yeah, you need to click on the eject button.
Well, I have no.
You gotta use the button.
Oh, yeah. Well, you say that. I thought she said this thing wasn't working. Here, get me out of this. She's got-
You just need to eject it? Is this your computer?
No, it's not my computer. This computer.
Window. What is this?
She had trouble. Yes, see if it's okay.
I can't even see what is.
Should be closed.
No, don't save. What is?
Normally, right there, see that? Can you, yeah, I couldn't find the picture. Okay, there we go.
Well, I don't know what to do from this. Oh, it says safely remove here.
Yeah.
Second floor
Jet.
joists.
Yeah.
The bedrooms sag so much.
Cool.
Do it. Just take it out.
It probably won't hurt anyway. Yeah, we got it. Okay, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's so interesting. I like the ones especially that are the wood engineered ones. I feel like it's fascinating. And like
That's
the-
way more
the-
fascinating
the
because they're working with what they had.
I just feel like they're kidding.
Yeah.
Like, like they're being lazy.
Yeah, 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 I will agree. One of these days I'll go to Portland. Try out the, when I told them I read about it, they contacted me immediately. Would you come out here and talk about it? Okay.
I wish we had this, but our events are probably but.
The code people don't like it, you know. But I'm sure it could be done in a way that. would be legal.
I'm here for the new group, but we had dance groups that used our building for practice. But I don't think it's.
No,
Like, it doesn't fly in the. For it. I know. I'll be.
Well, I'm part of a contra dance group. Wasatch Contras, and so the quality of the floor, a lot of people, if they're just coming in for the first time, the second time, they don't care, they don't know. But some of our people really care about the quality of the floor. And I know some people who made their own portable floors. Because if a floor, if you came into a place like this, you'd have to bring in a floor, but you can't dance like this. And so, and then I was telling Steve, I have been to the Colonial ballroom several times in San Diego, and that's a sprung floor. Okay. It's like a steel spring floor, I think, because when you walk across it, you can hear it. Creaking.
Close, it would make
Make a little sound. So I don't know if it's actually a coil spring or what kind of spring it is. But you walk across and it goes. It makes the same tripping sound. So it's pretty good. Yeah. And then I live in an old house, historic house, so it's very kind of tied into some of this stuff. Yeah.
I have an assistance for your old house. You're a little familiar to me.
But I don't know who does the fixer.
Well,
What do you fix?
If it was made by human hands, I would fix it.
Adobe?
Sure.
I'm not challenging, but my house is Adobe mostly, and it's scary.
I do a lot of complex restoration projects.
Yeah, you're in and it's abstract. Yeah.
I don't.
I know. Yeah, that's what.